The school system is still centered around people who latch onto information that's written in textbooks, whether it's true or not. And if you make these people work 50, 60, 70 hours per week to gain some certification to enter their professional field, they're going to think that they're better than the people who didn't spend 50 to 60 to 70 hours per week memorizing the letters that were on the papers that they see as their holy book.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Shift with Gina. I'm here with a friend of mine who you have seen before, Alex Feinberg.
What's up, Gina?
Welcome back to the show. I was just saying before we started filming that we could pass for siblings.
We could. I mean, everybody in the world is going to start looking like us. And
soon, they're all going to look like ethnically ambiguous, perhaps Asian people.
And then they can't claim racism as an issue.
Did you see that video? I just thought of this. Vince Dow posted this. Somebody said, hey, Asians, did you know that you're actually black? Like your ancestry is actually black.
Well, everybody's ancestry is black.
And I was like,
in that regard.
And just like that, I am pro reparations.
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody actually can trace their origins to Africa. And I guess that's the thing. If we ever did reparations, then instead of incentivizing people to create cool things to solve future problems, you incentivize people to dig into the past to figure out why they're part of an oppressed group to take money from everybody else. And so if I'm going to make $50,000 by convincing you that I'm part of an oppressed group, I'm going to do a pretty good job convincing you that I'm part of an oppressed group.
I've heard that about Italians before too, because I'm half Italian. I heard somebody on TikTok being like, Italians and Sicilians are actually black. I'm like, cool. Not only am I half black now, I'm full black because I'm half Asian.
Well, but that's actually more true because you look at the videos that are coming out from this last week where there's clearly an invasion of an Italian island. That's not new. Like Italy is very accessible, by Northern Africa. So, there's constant DNA sharing.
You can see with the features sometimes too.
Yeah. Darker.
Yeah. Okay. Well, before we jump into it, I got to do all the things, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I don't know if I told you this, Alex. I'm not able to monetize on YouTube. I got a video taken down for medical misinformation.
And that means you can't monetize forever, or?
Well, it's what it seems like.
Okay.
I don't know. It says you can reapply in 30 days, but they're not going to let me, monetize in 30 days. They're probably going to punish me for a couple of years or something. I don't know. Who knows? So for those of you who like the channel, or even if you're listening to the audio, just make sure if you like the content, share it, please. That's all I ask. Just share it. Let some people know that we have the show on. It's pretty new. Don't forget, if you are a woman and you're looking for a health group to be a part of online, The Shift is hosted on Mighty Networks. We do 4 workouts a week. We are always doing nutrition or fitness challenges. There's a ton of exclusive interviews over there that we're not able to put on YouTube because we use the V word. And we talk about a lot of health information that would be considered medical misinformation on YouTube. So click the link in the description to join if you're a woman, female, who would like to join a health community online. So having said all that, let's jump into it today. There are 3 things I wanted to talk about today. One of which you actually tweeted about earlier today or yesterday, but we'll get to that at the very end. First, I want to talk about this big controversy that the Washington Post actually reported on, revealing that a lot of these dietitians on social media were actually paid off by these food companies to promote foods that are not exactly healthy to their followers. And it all started with this hashtag campaign called The Safety of Aspartame. And it started with a lot of these dietitians sharing information from the World Health Organization that said that aspartame is really not safe, especially in high quantities. And all of these dietitians, all these TikToks came out within like 2 or 3 days of each other. So, they were essentially given a script and they were describing, well, this is why the WHO is wrong and it's not based on good science and this is all clickbait, it's fear-mongering headlines. And then it turned out that all of these health professionals, I use that lightly, were paid by American Beverage, which is a lobbying group that represents companies like Coca-Cola, Pepsi, etc. For example, there was a TikToker named Steph Grasso who calls herself a cancer dietitian. It's apparently a thing. And she told all of her followers not to fall for clickbait headlines. There's nothing wrong with aspartame. You can drink diet soda every day, blah, blah, blah. And look, as we get into this, I don't think think you, Alex, are the kind of person who'll be like, you can't ever drink diet soda, it's going to kill you. Like, that's not the point that we're trying to make here. I think the point here is that, you know, you have a lot of these registered dietitians who claim to be health professionals that want to help people get healthy, and they're obviously corrupt and they're paid off by these corrupt companies. So yeah, I mean, let's start with that today.
So I think if we want to take a neutral stance on it, I would say, or maybe to play devil's advocate, I would say that if I were a registered dietitian and were okay with the studies supporting aspartame, I wouldn't have a problem taking money from a company that was profiting off of aspartame. And I also wouldn't have a problem with a private company trying to push back against a conclusion that the World Health Organization arrived at. Because let's be real, like the World Health Organization has been wrong, will be wrong, they're not infallible. So to play devil's advocate, just because a private celebrity is taking money to push a message does not mean that that person does not believe in the message, and it does not mean that the person is saying false things to advance the message. However, there are reasons why the FCC wants you to disclose if the things you are saying are paid for, right? Because it helps consumers differentiate between something that's potentially a paid promotion versus something that you believe. If we want to look at this under a microscope, all opinion is manipulated by someone who seeks to profit from that opinion. So, you know, this issue doesn't just stop with food. It doesn't just stop with health. A lot of articles that you read in the New York Times or the Huffington Post or CNN are advanced by, you know, individuals or multinational corporations who will profit from these readers believing in an agenda that may not be aligned with truth. And the journalists that push this message may be receiving some form of compensation, direct or indirect, to advance this message, right? And I'm sure you knew this, you know, working in media. But just because somebody who has a nice title says something doesn't mean that it's true. Unfortunately, most people don't know how to think. Because most people went through their entire primary and secondary educations simply mimicking thoughts that smart people seem to say. People don't understand how to form coherent opinions for themselves, so they look to individuals who sound professional, who sound like they've thought through what they're saying, and they decide that, oh, that must be true because this person who wrote for the New York Times said it's true. And we know that that's not the case, but we also know that if you want to influence public opinion, you need to use these conduits to launder your message, essentially. So it's not just health, it's everything.
Yeah. And then this also kind of spiraled into past aspartame. It spiraled into sugar. So you have these, so the Canadian Sugar Institute, for example, was caught paying off a dietitian like this girl named Lindsay Plescott, who posted a reel that was called "What to Do When You Crave Ice Cream" from a registered dietitian. And she was seen opening up like the standard tub of ice cream you get from like Kroger or something, right? And she was opening it up and she was scooping into it. She made a huge cone and she's eating it. She's like, when you crave ice cream, you just eat it. And then she talked about how the eat around, this is from her caption, "Have you heard of the eat around? I'm going to let you in on a little secret that is a game changer for cravings. You know the I want ice cream, so I'll have a frozen banana nice cream instead. Here's what's likely to happen. You eat the nice cream, you're still craving the ice cream, but you know you really shouldn't eat it. So you eat a handful of nuts, still not satisfied. Maybe a handful of chocolate chips next, nope, and on and on." So she essentially says if you're craving ice cream, you should eat a tub of this trash ice cream. And like, here's the thing, side note, ice cream, when it's made from raw milk, I mean, and like raw honey, for example, it's truly a superfood, right? The problem is that 99.9% of Westerners, Canadians, Americans do not understand the difference between the ice cream that you get from the grocery store that's packed with, you know, obviously ingredients that are far under nutritious and really bad for you, between that and something that you would make at home, some sort of ice cream that you would make at home that would be nutritious. And so you have these dietitians that are now running around, and she's in the caption, she says ad. So it turns out that she did disclose she was being paid by the Canadian Sugar Institute. And then in another post, she says, want to know the best way to cut sugar? Dietitian approved. With a knife, with my hands, with my teeth. And she showed herself eating cookies, peanut butter cups, candy, something, whatever. So this is all paid by the Canadian Sugar Institute. And so this came out as well. And people were talking about how she was downplaying the health risks of added sugar. Do you see this a little bit different than something like the safety of aspartame?
Well, I see it actually like what all vice industries do, whether you're looking at an alcohol commercial, whether you're looking at a gambling commercial, or whether you're looking at a sugar commercial. All of these vendors will say, we want you to play responsibly. We want you to drink responsibly. We want you part of a balanced breakfast. And so the stance that they all take is you can enjoy these things and still be healthy, which is true on one hand. Right. I eat ice cream. You eat ice cream. And we don't always eat the cleanest ice cream.
Right.
And we're still relatively healthy. At the same time, if you understand the Pareto principles behind how vice companies make money, if casinos couldn't support gambling addicts, they would be out of business. If you look at the alcohol consumption by decile in the United States, the top decile of alcohol consumers averages over 10 drinks per day, according to the Washington Post about 10 years ago. And so the top decile of alcohol consumers consumes about 80% of the alcohol consumed in the United States. Do you think Anheuser-Busch would be selling products if they couldn't sell this 80% to the decile of the population that clearly cannot consume the products, safely?
Responsibly.
No. And I haven't seen the data around sugar consumption, but I would not be surprised if it was the same. If you looked at added sugar consumption, it would not surprise me if 20% of the population consumed 80% of the added sugar.
Right.
And so, yes, you could consume a little bit safely, but if everybody actually consumed this product safely, all of these companies would be out of business because 80% of their revenue would be gone.
Right. And that's that's what I was thinking as well. It's, in a way, she's right. In a way, this dietitian is right. Mm-hmm. There is nothing wrong with having a little bit of store-bought ice cream here and there. There is nothing wrong with having some diet soda here and there. But the problem is that most people they're just not able to differentiate between what's a healthy, responsible consumption and what's not.
Yeah.
And did you see also that there was a dietitian, a different one, and she didn't disclose that she was paid by Big Food, but everyone suspects that she is. She was talking about the best pre-workout snacks to have. Mm-hmm. And this video, I shared this TikTok on Twitter probably maybe a month or two ago now. And she says the best fast digestible carbs to have are a banana. Mm-hmm. I was like, okay, I'm with you. Rice Krispie treats, Pop-Tarts, a chewy granola bar, and like something else that was similar to a Pop-Tart. Mm-hmm. And this is a dietitian that's sharing, and she has said before that her target audience is like everyday people who are just trying to get healthy or maybe trying to lose weight. And I shared it and I was like, why are we telling like average Americans their average workout is like they go to Zumba for 40 minutes.
Right.
They do like a cycling class. Like they're going to go to like Barry's boot camp class or something. Why are we telling these people to eat a Pop-Tart like 4 times a week before their workout? Sure. And then when I posted that, I had a lot of like bodybuilders and guys who were in the elite, like 1% of the country be like, this girl doesn't know anything, man. I squat 300 pounds and I eat Snickers every time I work out. I'm like, that's the point though, is that 99.9% of Americans are not going to the gym to max out with weights. Like she's telling people to eat a Pop-Tart before they go to a cycling class.
Right.
When they're already addicted to processed sugars, they're already not eating nutritious foods. And you're telling them that the best option for fast digestible carbs before going to Zumba is a Pop-Tart.
Yeah. Like I recently started consuming fast digestible carbs before my lifts in the form of fruit bars.
Right.
But the reason was because I wanted to be able to deadlift 445 pounds for reps more easily. Right. Because I could deadlift 405 pounds for reps without consuming fast digestible carbs before my workout. And I actually got leaner when I had fewer carbs in my system, but because I had some strength goals that I wanted to pursue, I'm like, okay, let me see what I can do to, replenish my glycogen stores or get a little bit more sugar in my bloodstream. And so, yeah, like what percentage of the population is performing at the level where that small benefit is going to be meaningful for them? It's like 1%.
Yes.
So if you're not in that 1%, which is most people, you shouldn't really be having that. Most people should be eating 2 meals a day. And realistically, most people who will work out, 3 or fewer times per week should eat 2 meals per day, one of which should not have carbs, because there's nothing that they do that actually requires the energy inputs of what an elite athlete does. Mm-hmm. And it's okay if that's you. Just be honest with yourself.
Yeah. And that's something that I think people fail to understand, because and this is just what everyone does, when you see a reel on TikTok or Twitter, Instagram, whatever, you automatically assume it applies to you. So the circles that we sort of run in on Twitter, most of them are, especially in the health and fitness circle, like they're more in the elite category. So they see a dietitian promoting a Pop-Tart and they're like, yeah, I do that. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's hard for them to understand that it's like, almost, if you put 100 people in a room, 99 of those people should not be doing that, because they're not practicing the same things that, someone who's going to deadlift 450 pounds is.
Well, I mean, the other thing is the 99% of the population isn't actually paying that close attention to what these dietitians are saying. They're learning more through repetition, which is how propaganda works. Is like, if they hear the same message over and over and over again from 10 different quote unquote experts, they're just going to think that that's true. Oh, I can have Pop-Tarts before I train.
Right.
That's how most people arrive at truth. Most people don't arrive at truth by saying, oh, well, I tried this 5 times and it worked, and I didn't try it 5 times and it didn't work, therefore it works. They think it's true because someone in a perceived position of authority has anointed it with the truth,
right?
The science.
So are these dietitians corrupt?
Some of them are, some of them aren't. I think, any industry is going to include people who are honest and people who are dishonest and people who are operating in the gray area. And I think if you want to have some degree of visibility, you need money to support your mission. And so I think the most visible dietitians probably are subject to the greatest temptation, right? Because you build a following, you need to monetize that to pay your own bills, and you have offers from a wide variety of sponsors who can pay you to push a message. And so, just like if you took a random sample of 100 people in the population, would you say this if you got $100,000? Probably 80 of them would kind of say it.
Yeah.
And 20 of them would say, yeah, I don't know, that, maybe not. So yeah, a lot of stuff is going to be corrupted. Not everything. But I mean, yeah, the only way around that is to do your own research, be comfortable with the methodology of a lot of studies if you read them. I tweeted the other day that there's a study about how likelihood to get COVID vaccinated was correlated with intelligence, and the tweeter posted a link to a study that was done in Sweden. I'm like, that's very interesting. Let me look into the methodology of this study. So first of all, they separate intelligence by 9 strata. So the top intelligence band only has an IQ of 108, which is not very high.
Yeah.
Right. So, but that's considered the most intelligent. And so people say, well, because the most intelligent people are vaccinated at a higher rate than the least intelligent people, then the conclusion that people have is, well, this is what smart people do. I look further into the study. I'm like, okay, so this study was done on 750,000 Swedish men and 3,000 Swedish women. And they ascertained their intelligence based on their scores on mandatory military service tests that were taken at the age of 18. I'm thinking, okay, so this test was done on an 85% ethnically Swedish population, or 85% ethnically European population, of which 99.5% are men. That demographic wouldn't fly to support a study if the same people pushed it for anything that didn't support the thing that they wanted to believe anyway. Right. So, but nobody believes the method, nobody reads the methodology. They just read the conclusion and say, okay, well, that's probably true.
Yeah. Lying with statistics.
Yeah.
They're not lying, but they are.
Yeah.
That's a scary thing. And that's why, have you seen that meme? It's the bell curve of like the IQ bell curve. And on like the low end, it's like the retarded person. And he's like, well, my mama did it, so I'm going to do it.
Yes.
And then like in the middle where it's, most people have an average IQ. They're like, where are your studies?
Yeah.
Where are your studies? I need to see the proof on that. Where is your data and statistics? And then on the other low end where it's high IQ, the person's like, I know with my intuition and God-given belief that doesn't make sense.
Right. And it's to my earlier point about people not knowing how to think, because thinking is different than education, right? I think Mark Twain said, never let your education get in the way of your learning. But the more I think about how our university system works is they teach thinking as if it's a language. And so there's certain rules that support university-sponsored thought. And if a conclusion uses rules that are disallowed by the university-sponsored thought police, then the conclusion is considered invalid.
Yeah.
But you know who uses conclusions like this or thought processes like this? Successful businessmen, successful athletes, successful individuals.
Right.
They don't actually process information using university-sponsored thought processes. And so what ends up happening is the PhDs and the professors who come from these universities and the graduates who come from these universities look at these successful people and they assume that they're lucky because they used methods
privileged
because they used methods that are disapproved by their priestly caste. And then they feel entitled to tax those people for the success that they've had because they think the success is actually luck rather than due to some degree of hard work and intuition. Right? All of it ties together. And what happens is the university system only teaches one language of thought. There are plenty of languages of thought, but that language of thought is latched onto by the people in the middle of the bell curve, right? The people on the tail ends of the bell curve either can't understand the language of thought that's taught by the university system or can think at a level high enough to invalidate the language of thought that's taught by the university system as the only mechanism to understand one's surroundings.
Mm-hmm. That was a good clip. What's the timestamp? 23-ish. That was a good clip. But I mean, speaking of the system and the university system, this is why doctors and nurses, they have a really hard time. Like they have such a hard time thinking outside of the system that was given to them in medical school. And now, obviously, even before the pandemic, I think a lot of people there was a lot of distrust happening with doctors and nurses. I mean, especially when it comes to treating chronic illnesses and a lot of women struggling with a hormonal birth control pill and not getting answers from doctors and nurses. It almost offends them whenever someone brings a different perspective on how to approach things. So for example, I did an interview with a friend of mine who's a holistic practitioner. She works with kids a lot, children's wellness, children's immune system. And she described the function of a fever. Mm-hmm. What's the point of a fever, right? The point is that the body heats up to a certain temperature to go attack whatever is attacking the body. And that's why in a lot of cases, when you just give kids medicine or even adults, right, you give somebody medicine to lower the fever immediately, then you're squelching the purpose of the fever. Mm-hmm. So in the clip, she was simply describing what is the function of a fever? Like, do we know what that is? As parents who inevitably are going to have sick children, it's important to just know what the function of a fever is. And I knew we were going to get angry comments from nurses, and without fail, there were nurses in the comments section that were deeply insulted and furious at the fact that somebody would even suggest a different way to approach and treat fevers. Because they were always taught that the only thing you're supposed to do, right? This is in the university system, medical university system. You have to lower the fever because they're going to get a febrile seizure, because it could cause irreversible brain damage, because it's making the child uncomfortable. And this is how they function. This is how they treat kids in the doctor's offices, in the hospitals, whatever. And when you present a different way of thinking to people who have been in the system for so long, they take it as this deep offense and insult.
You need to understand professional castes like you would understand cults. What I mean by that is if you're forming a cult or you're running a university fraternity, the higher the hurdle that you make the entrance leap over, or the harder the hazing process, the more deeply loyal the members will be to the cult. And so this has been replicated through psychological studies. What people don't realize is investment banking does this through 2-year analyst programs, followed by associate programs where people are working 80 to 100-hour weeks doing meaningless work, right? The harder and more meaningless work that you have the lower level members of the cult perform, the more loyal they're going to be to the cult.
Wow.
So what do you think medical school is? What do you think nursing school is?
Yeah.
A lot of it is rote memorization and regurgitation by people whose brains happen to be very good at memorizing information that's written on paper, right? Everybody learns differently. Some people learn with their hands, learn by doing, learn by watching videos. It just so happens that our university system rewards people who are able to latch onto information that's found in textbooks. Okay, so a very specific portion of the population is going to be anointed as smart based on how information has been disseminated over the last couple hundred years within our society, which is mainly due to technological limitations and the fact that books were the primary medium of information distribution. So we always thought that nerds were the people who read a lot of books, but nerds for our generation might be people who are really good at consuming information on YouTube, right? They're not going to look the same, but the school system is still centered around people who latch onto information that's written in textbooks, whether it's true or not. And if you make these people work 50, 60, 70 hours per week to gain some certification to enter their professional field, they're going to think that they're better than the people who didn't spend 50 to 60 to 70 hours per week memorizing the letters that were on the papers that they see as their holy book.
That's really interesting. Yeah. And of course it does turn into superiority complex because a lot of the comments turn into, I've worked in hospitals for how much clinical experience do you have?
Yeah.
Right. It's like they can't separate that people are able to learn things without going through the same exact system that they've gone through.
And the challenge also is they're middle of the bell curve people.
Right.
And they think that you're lower bell curve. Because a majority of the people who say things like this are actually lower of the bell curve people. And so they don't understand that your reasons for believing something might be true are a little bit better thought through than the person on the lower end of the bell curve. It's just like, educated liberals think that all Trump supporters have 85 IQs or below. Right. They just think, because a lot of Trump supporters do have 85 IQs or below, they don't understand how people on both sides of the bell curve might agree and that they might be intellectually superior to people on one side of the bell curve while getting intellectually decimated by people on the other side of the bell curve.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting because it's true, right? They say, oh, well, all the Trump supporters are just dumb. Well, like, in a way that is true.
Yeah.
But they don't understand that.
Right. Like if academic research meant nothing to you, right? There's two reasons academic research might mean nothing to you or very little to you. One, you're not smart enough to read the academic research. Two, you are smart enough to read the academic research and you find that it's very corrupt and not worth listening to. Okay. So that would represent both ends of the bell curve in a situation where academic research has been corrupted, right? The people in the middle of the bell curve are smart enough to interpret the academic research, but not smart enough to realize its flaws.
Right. Okay, speaking of school, university system, I was going to say this till the end, but this is the perfect timing. There was somebody named Hannah Cox. She posted a screenshot talking about how it's hard for men to find partners when women are outpacing them both at school and work. So I'm just going to read the excerpt that she shared, and then I'll read what she wrote, and then we'll talk about your response to it. Because as soon as I read her tweet, I was like, man, I got to talk about this. And then you tweeted about it, so this is perfect timing. So the excerpt she shared says, but part of it also boils down to this. It's hard for men to find partners at a moment when women are outpacing them both at school and work. Young women now hold 1.6 million more college degrees than men, and in a growing number of cities, including LA, DC, and New York, they make as much as or more than their male counterparts. And even if they become mothers, odds are 4 in 10 will become the breadwinners of the households. So she shared this and then she wrote, women don't need to lower their standards. Instead, we need to figure out why men, on average, are falling so far behind their female counterparts. This is a vastly important question. Biologically, most women are simply not going to be attracted to a man they don't see as an equal. So I'm not even going to respond to this because I want to read your tweet and then we'll talk about it. Alex says, both school and the workforce reward obedience. So the easiest way to get a degree and a 100K job is to be obedient. Women are better at this by nature, trait agreeableness. So above average men are falling behind above average women, but elite men are running laps around both.
Yeah.
Go ahead, talk about that.
So think about this. Like if you want a 6-figure job with the highest degree of certainty, the way you get it is you go to college and you maybe go to graduate school, or you just work hard for a large company for about 6 years. And at that point, you have a job that makes you work 50 hours a week or more, and you're making 100K if you're living in a coastal city. That's not a very fun life, but if you're willing to be someone's slave and your life gets meaning from other people telling you what a good job you're doing, then you'll see that as success, right? More women will see that as success than men will. Mm-hmm. More women are willing to kowtow to their superiors and get the pat on the back and put 50 hours a week of work in to get some letters at the end of their name and a job working for a quote unquote stable company that pays them $9,000 a month or more. Men are more likely to pursue ultra success. Right? So men need to have a shinier object to chase for the most part. And so more men are going to figure out how to make, say, $100,000 a month than women, because to make $100,000 a month, you need to be at least a little bit disagreeable, right? So the type of person who makes $10,000 a month has certain qualities that the person who makes $3,000 a month doesn't have, but also lacks certain qualities that the person who makes $100,000 a month doesn't have. And so anytime people look at why is this cohort doing better than that cohort, one of the mistakes that they make is assuming that the distribution of people within each cohort is the same. It's not.
Right.
It is not. And so, yes, every system that we have is being co-opted by people who can profit from that system. So the university system was created by business magnates to produce obedient employees, and large companies will promote obedient employees because they're the ones that provide the lowest risk and the highest return on investment. And so a lot of your life from the age of 0 to 30 is simply rewarding you for your obedience, which is why over the last 40 years, we have seen men fall behind women because men are told that they're bad kids for not sitting still in school. Mm-hmm. Boys don't care as much what teachers think about them as girls do.
Right.
Boys aren't going to care as much what their boss says about them in an employee review as girls will or as women will. And so because of that, men are going to be more likely to start their own companies than women are. Mm-hmm. And they're going to be less likely to get promoted within large companies, right? All else being equal. So that's exactly what we're seeing. We're seeing fewer successful men than before, but probably more ultra successful men than before.
Right.
All of this leads to, the Mike Cernovich observation that harems are being built, right? Because what's going to end up happening is there's going to be a smaller number or a small but growing number of ultra successful men that these somewhat successful women will look towards and say, well, I want that person as my partner. And you're going to just end up having a growing cast of incels, which every population has seen as a threat because they're the ones who commit crimes to increase their social status, which will directly lead to an expansion of their mating opportunities.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, when I was reading her tweet, the first thing I noticed is that the excerpt that she shared is, women are outpacing men at both school and work. And it's funny, it's because it's those categories that I think are just more suited to women succeeding, just like you said. right? It's the agreeableness, the trait of agreeableness. I don't know why women get offended when you say that that's a trait, because that trait is it's actually useful in a lot of roles that we have, and especially when it comes to being wives and mothers. So it's not like it's an inherently bad trait, but reading this, it's also like the entitlement that women like this have. Like they automatically think that because they have more college degrees than men do, that they're automatically in this higher category and men need to raise their standards. I mean, I think it also just, we're seeing this new wave of like a gender war, right? The gender wars now are different than what it was like when feminism really started to take control of society. I feel like now it's sort of flipped, where feminism made men hate women, and then this sort of red pill manosphere rise made women hate men. And this kind of stuff that she posted here, I feel like it just makes the gender wars even worse, because a lot of these women are not even willing to ask themselves, why is our society set up like this now? Why do women have more college degrees than men? They just look at it and they automatically make an assumption that women are better than men, that they're just performing better than men.
Well, let's peel this onion back and think, how did we get to this point? And if, looking back, when I was a kid, a lot of my classmates had moms who didn't have corporate jobs, didn't have full-time jobs. That's very uncommon now. And I think 20 years before I was a kid, probably even more mothers would not have corporate jobs. So the amount of kids, including daughters, who've grown up without their mother in the house has grown substantially.
Right.
So who is the primary educator of those daughters? Well, when the mother's in the house, it's probably the mother, but when the mother's not in the house, it's probably the state or the education system.
Yeah.
So what does the education system teach a girl to value herself by? It's success within the state-sponsored education system, rather than what a mother would teach a daughter to be, to judge herself by, which is, probably the ability to be a good mother, particularly if that mother's a stay-at-home mother and was selected for her ability to be a good mother.
Yeah.
And so as women have grown to evaluate themselves based on their ability to climb the ladder that was previously designed for male-to-male competition, women are going to become more masculinized in their view of what a meaningful pursuit is before they've actually had kids. And so what I think has happened is a lot of women have grown up hearing state-sponsored messages that you can have it all. Sheryl Sandberg does it all. You can do it too. Don't let anybody tell you can't. Don't let anybody tell you can't work for that corporation. Don't let anybody tell you that you can't apply for that job that men do and bring the wages down across the board, because with more applicants, there's going to be the companies aren't going to have to offer as much for somebody to do that work. You can do it too. And then when women hit their 20s, just like men, when they hit their 20s, both cohorts get really frustrated with how corporate America works, because no matter male, female, if you're 23 years old and really smart and good at your job, you're still not going to get promoted. And there's still going to be some dumbass ahead of you who's 37 years old and tells you what to do because he's been at the company longer, right? Well, most of those people are still men, right? And so the women will look at them, the 37-year-old dumbass man, and say, well, he's only there because he's a man. Not thinking he's actually only there because he was dumb enough to stay on that corporate ladder for 15 more years. And it's usually just men who are dumb enough or unfortunate enough in their life circumstances where they're still climbing that corporate ladder 15 years later. And so women will think that I'm not in that position because I'm a woman. I'm not in that position because the entire system was structured to screw everybody over, and I'm in the everybody bucket until I spend 15 years trying to climb that. And so then they start getting mad at all men for being part of a patriarchy that they believe now was designed to keep them from fulfilling their lifelong dreams of climbing within the corporate ladder and having it all. It's all wrong, but that's exactly how you brainwash people.
Yeah, and it's like that Gloria Steinem quote, "We are becoming the men that we wanted to marry." And that is exactly what's happening. When did she say that quote? It's Gloria Steinem, "We are becoming the men." When did she say that? It couldn't have been before the 90s that she said that. Okay, so I think it was a battle cry from the 70s. And it was like prophetic in a way, because that is what's happening. You have a lot of these women that are becoming the men they wanted to marry because they think what they think they want to marry is the kind of man who gets up, he puts on his suit, he goes to his reliable job, he listens to his boss, he makes the money, he comes home at 6. And so that's exactly the sort of path they think that their future husband should go down. And that's exactly what they end up doing. So they end up becoming the men that they thought that they were supposed to marry. And then what does that do, especially in terms of dating and romance and marriage? It makes them much less desirable to men. Because what kind of man wants to marry a woman who has become the man that she wanted to marry?
100%. It's the saddest thing is to see women squander their most valuable asset in the dating market in their early to mid 20s so they can try to become men.
Right.
Like I figured this out when I was in college. If I was 20, 21 years old, if I was a hot chick who's 20, 21 years old, I would just be like at the gym all the time because that's going to maximize my sexual marketplace value. And I'm not going to have to work. If my goal is to not work, which has been my goal for my entire career, is to not work. I've like succeeded by figuring out how to not work and be good at it. But if that were my goal, I would just try to be like really good looking. And so many women are like, oh, I should go be an accountant or I should go be a banker because it's like, you're not going to look as good when you do that. You're going to depreciate your body. And when you depreciate your body, you're depreciating the most valuable resource that you can to secure as high value of a man that your genetics could possibly support.
Right. Yeah. And when I talk about this too, because, a lot of women are like, well, what are women just never ever supposed to work? I'm not saying, and I think you probably agree with this, I'm not saying that women are not supposed to do anything but be at home all the time. Like if you look at historically, traditionally, what was the role of the wife and the mother? She worked very hard, but she did it in the context of the home. She was always creating goods to sell for profit. She was doing farm labor. She was gathering food. She was, especially before things like the washing machine and the dishwasher were invented, working at home, that was a real, that's a real thing to do. That's a real job. So by no means am I saying that women should be these like lazy people that don't know how to do anything. But when we're talking about work, like we're talking about the traditional sort of like 9-to-5 office corporate job that so many women are aspiring to. And it doesn't really get them anywhere, because if your goal is really, and it should be to be a wife and or a mother, like you need to really be preparing yourself for that. And the way to do that is not to commit yourself to the workforce 24/7, because what you're going to get out of that is it's not going to prepare you for motherhood. And like I always tell, I always talk about also like the other extreme of the sort of trad trend that we see. There's like this aesthetic. It's the Instagram aesthetic of like in my sundress and basking in the sun with my 3 kids. And I'm just going to wake up and maybe make some sourdough. Like if you're really a stay-at-home mom who has children and you're taking care of the home and you're taking care of your husband, like it's not easy. Like it takes some work, especially if you have a lot of young kids running around. Like it is not easy. It can be very stressful, but it's the kind of work that women are really designed to do. And so when they commit themselves to this 9-to-5 workforce, they leave and they realize that the work that they're supposed to be doing at home is totally foreign to them.
Yeah. And, part of it, I would say is the fault of men and the technology that men have created, because men have actually made themselves obsolete to some extent in the modern economy. Because if you think about how nature works, most people live in places that are inhospitably cold, at least a certain portion of the year. And they're only warm because we figured out how to like extract gas from the earth and heat them through like central heating. Because if that didn't exist, then women would have to go chop wood and start their own fires in order to maintain body heat. And guess who's really good at that? Going through painful endeavors to secure wood and start fires. It's like men. Men have historically been able to sacrifice that for their families. But that's not valuable anymore. Women can do that. Women can actually go have a job, earn money, and pay for their house to be warmer for like the first time in human history,
right,
over the last, whatever, 70 years since central heating became popularized. And so, part of it, I guess, to give the devil his due, is true that men are not as valuable to women now as they were historically. When men see themselves as not being as valuable, they put in less work because a natural response is, well, why should I put this work in? What's the point? And so this is actually a consequence of a functional economy that incentivizes the specialization of labor. And so it's not so easy to just say, well, women, you're going to be happier if you're just moms. It's like, yeah, they will be, but at the same time, is that going to give them all the fulfillment in their life? No, because the way the mind works is you're never going to be satisfied 100%. There's always going to be opportunities that you feel like you're missing out. That's what sacrifices are. That's what finite resources lead to, is you can't be good at everything. Life is going to be unfair. There are going to be circumstances that you feel like you couldn't have excelled or proven yourself or gotten the credit that you deserved because your focus was somewhere else.
Yeah. Let's talk about one more thing. How much time do we have? Yeah, we have time to show the video. I showed you this video before we started. I saw this video and it really scared me. So to give you guys a little bit of context here, this is a video posted by the World Economic Forum warning us about the possibility of a cyber pandemic. And this video was posted 2 years ago.
COVID-19 pandemic has shaken our economies and societies to the core and shown us how vulnerable we are to biological threats. In the digital world, similar risks are being overlooked right now. A cyber attack with COVID-like characteristics would spread faster and further than any biological virus. Its reproductive rate would be around 10 times greater than what we've experienced with the coronavirus. To give you an idea, one of the fastest worms in history, the 2003 Slammer sapphire worm, doubled in size approximately every 8.5 seconds, infecting over 75,000 devices in 10 minutes and almost 11 million devices in 24 hours. Fortunately, at least until now, cyber attacks have not impacted our health the way pandemics have, but the economic damages, and therefore the impact they have had on our daily lives, have been equal and sometimes even greater. You see, the only way to stop the exponential propagation of a COVID-like cyber threat is to fully disconnect the millions of vulnerable devices from one another and from the internet. All of this in a matter of days. A single day without the internet would cost our economies more than $50 billion, and that's before considering the economic and societal damages should these devices be linked to essential services such as transport or healthcare. As the digital realm increasingly merges with our physical world, the ripple effects of cyber attacks on our safety just keep on expanding at a faster pace than what we're preparing for. COVID-19 was known as an anticipated risk. So is the digital equivalent. Let's be better prepared for that one. The time is now.
Okay. Thank you, World Economic Forum. So just to give a little bit more context about the sapphire slammer, which is, it refers to the slammer worm in 2003. This fast-spreading computer worm targeted servers running Microsoft's SQL Server and MSDE database products. Within just 15 minutes of its release, it infected approximately 75,000 systems, causing widespread outages and network congestion. Unlike many other worms, SQL Slammer was incredibly small, just 376 bytes, allowing it to operate very quickly. It exploited a buffer overflow vulnerability in Microsoft's SQL Server, sending a single rogue UDP packet to infect the target machine. The impact of the worm was immense, both in terms of For example, ATM services were down for a large bank, emergency call centers were disrupted, etc. So that's sort of a little bit more context of what the sapphire slammer worm is. Are we going to have a cyber pandemic, Alex?
Yeah, there's a good chance, and not even if it's done maliciously. I think the likelihood of a cyber pandemic is just as high due to incompetency or the fact that if you understand how technology is architected, all technological solutions are built under the assumption that the underlying solutions will work, right? So if you are charging your phone in your car, you assume that your car will turn on so that your phone will charge. If you think about how all the technology products that exist on the internet or even outside the internet, they're all built on top of other technology products, some of which are built upon continually deprecating features. And so if a product is built on something that's not being constantly updated, or it's built on 70 different things, one of which is not being sufficiently updated or maintained, then the integrity of the entire system can be challenged. That's why if you go on Instagram or Twitter, sometimes it'll just be down for 60 minutes. Like, what do you think that is? It's like, well, something that it was built on stopped working, that affected the entire system. And so as technology becomes more pervasive, the technology stacks that the end products are built upon will become increasingly complex. And just like, COVID kind of destroyed supply chains around the world, you can think of, technology dependencies as a supply chain where it doesn't need to break in every point. It just needs to break in one point for the entire thing to stop working. And so I think that the likelihood of that happening increases as our reliance on technology increases, and it's only going in one direction.
Okay, so what is there anything we can do to prepare for something like this? Okay, so let's say something like this does happen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what happens? Like, you can't take money from your bank account. You can't call 911. Like what happens?
Well, I mean, I guess you kind of have to be a prepper. Like, basically what would you do if food stopped getting delivered? The water would probably still flow from your pipes. The gas would probably still come from your stove.
But no electricity.
No electricity, right? Do you have a backup generator?
Yeah, but it's small. We got to get a better one.
Yeah, we got to plug ours in. I have it. It's just been sitting on the side. I don't even know how to use it. But I think you need to have a backup generator to keep your meat cool or frozen, ideally. It would probably be good to have a secondary source of fuel. So if you had a propane grill,
okay,
in case the main line got cut, as well as a large enough propane tank or several propane tanks that you could purchase that you could use until some sort of sanity was restored. You can go full prepper and you say, well, I'm just going to live off the land. Like, okay, you could do that, but how many people actually have the wherewithal to understand what that entails? Like, not me, I wouldn't be able to do it. So for most urban dwellers with non-functional life navigation skills, such as myself, I think the best bet is figure out how to keep your food cool, figure out how to keep a clean water supply, figure out how to cook your food until something gets fixed, and then have enough ammunition to keep yourself safe, because guess what? If you're fed but everybody else is hungry, you're in danger.
I think we need some more ammunition, honey. Right? Yeah. This freaks me out.
Yeah.
Because if you think about something like this happening, I mean, realistically, how long would you be without electricity and all that? Like, how long would it take for the systems to go back up? That's my biggest question too.
Well, and the thing is, the people who are operating the systems would also be without electricity. Are they guaranteed food? Like, who knows? Probably not. And so the people who'd survive, it would just be like, when the dinosaurs got taken out, like everything bigger than a cockroach got taken out. All the cockroaches, the insects, they all survived. The small reptiles survived. But anything with some degree of complexity, it all died. And if you think about, traditional societies, the people who live in caves are going to be all right. Amish, they're going to be all right. Mormons are probably going to be all right because they got 6 months of food stored up. But the people who are living with, 4 days of food in their pantry, they're probably not going to be in a good spot. And I think the bigger issue is what are those people going to do when they're hungry? Are they going to leave you alone if you live in a nice suburban neighborhood? Like, probably not, right? Because someone who's nice is only nice because they're rested and fed. And if you don't let them sleep or eat for 7 days, like, they're not going to be nice anymore.
Oh my gosh. Oh gosh. Okay. Well, I'm going to spend all weekend prepping. We need to prep because we got a generator. We have a lot of the freeze dried food. Mm-hmm. And remember that company Heaven's Harvest that, they like kind of,
you even have canned food.
Yeah, we've got that, but like we got to prep a little bit more. It's scary because even when it comes to the power grid, I don't think we realize how delicate it is. Like, so this area of Middle Tennessee has been growing really rapidly. So for some reason, our zip code, we have power outages like once a month.
Sure.
And Christmas last year, we lost power for like 2.5 days and it was like 1 degree outside.
Yeah.
And luckily we had the backup generator and all that, but our daughter was only a year old at the time. Mm-hmm. So when you have little kids, that's kind of a scary thing. We obviously have plenty of food and like 2.5 days is not long at all, but it's made us think it's like, and since then it's basically like every month the power just goes out because they don't have the infrastructure to support this growing area. And, they don't care to repair things fast enough. So now when I hear about things like this, I'm like, we got to prepare because.
Yeah. Well, and you also have to think, how are the leadership positions selected for these energy companies? Do they have diversity criteria that they're trying to hit? Right?
DEI.
Yeah, because 20 years ago, nobody would think that they did. People would just think, well, hopefully they pick the most competent person. Is there some degree of corruption and nepotism? Of course. Hopefully that doesn't happen. Now we have a different problem to contend with is they're selected for their race or gender or sexual orientation, not because they're the best person at, managing energy balances to support the grid of a local jurisdiction. And so I think, just like in Soviet Russia, where people advanced through government bureaucracies for reasons other than their own merit, people in the United States will advance through government bureaucracies or utility companies for reasons other than their own merit. And the implications are we're not going to have power all the time anymore. And nobody's going to blame it on that.
Gosh, this is so freaky. All right, well, we got to get ready for the cyber pandemic because the scary thing is that if the WEF is talking about this 2 years ago, like something's going to happen soon.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, you look at these organizations like, are they conspiring? Are they controlled by people who are conspiring? Like, yes and no, but like, just because they say it doesn't mean that like, the New World Order people are like sitting and plotting like, how are we going to do this? Because unless the New World Order people plan to like all go off grid at the same time, which they could, I suppose, it's going to be really hard for them to execute. Like, I think one thing that these people are very scared of is riots and uncontrollable disorder.
Yeah.
Because with uncontrollable disorder, like they're only rich because they can enslave the rest of the population.
Yeah.
If there's uncontrolled disorder, they can't enslave the rest of the population. Their wealth effectively is decimated.
Yeah.
So they need to have, if they want to maintain control and like limit carbon or whatever it is that they're scared of, they need a controlled demolition, not an uncontrolled demolition.
Right. And that's why I was thinking if something like this were to happen, I don't think they would let it go on for too long because it would not take long for people to riot.
Right.
And just go, because we're used to rioting now. Rioting is like, oh, black guy dies, let's riot. So imagine electricity being out, people can't access their finances. Like they would riot in a split second and it would just be total chaos.
Yeah.
So I would imagine that if something like this were to happen, even if it weren't intentional, they wouldn't allow it to go on for too long because it would just turn into total chaos.
Well, accessing your finances wouldn't even be the biggest problem. The biggest problem would be physical good availability, right? Because it's like, yeah, you can have access to all your finances, but if all the stores are out of food,
what good is it?
What are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
Order something off Amazon? They're not going to deliver it either.
Oh, freaky stuff. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in today. Alex, where can everybody find you?
Find me on Twitter, Alex Feinberg 1.
Cool.
Find me on YouTube, Alex Feinberg 1. Instagram, Alex Feinberg Official. Come talk to me. We'll talk about politics, fitness, getting jacked without counting calories or going hungry,
That's something that Alex is very good at.
Yeah.
Everyone out there listening, you know what tweet I really enjoyed of yours recently that really made people mad? The Oliver Anthony guy.
Yes.
You were like, I'm sick of looking at ugly people.
Yeah.
And people got really offended by it. But in a way, I'm like, I'm so sick of ugly people. Like being put in these positions, like these public, I want to look at beautiful people. I want to look at good looking people.
Yeah.
And this is not some shallow thing. This is like, our culture has rejected beauty because beauty is inseparable from truth and good.
Yeah.
And now we're promoting all this like this poor stuff and this ugly stuff. I don't know if you listen. Well, we have to call him Fick Nuentes because he's like banned everywhere. I can't say his real name.
Okay.
He did this rant about Oliver Anthony on his show 2 days ago, and I thoroughly enjoyed it because at one point he was like, this guy's ugly. He's like, he's pretending to be poor. He's rich now. He's pretending to be poor. I'm sick of looking at his ugly face, and he's making himself look ugly. Like, have some self-respect, dude. You got money now. Dress nice. Make yourself look good. And I thought about your tweet. You were like, I'm sick of looking at ugly people. And I was like, me too.
And I was ahead of the curve on that because this was like, I don't know, day 5 or something where everybody was sharing his video. And I legitimately just didn't want to watch it. Like, I would have listened to the song. I did listen to most of the song on Spotify. I actually didn't really find the song to be that great either. He has a great voice, no doubt. So many people like identified with this guy. Like he was their Jesus.
He is me.
He was their Mohammed. I'm like, I had no idea because I just didn't get that deep in the Oliver Anthony game. I was just, trying to be funny and truthful. Being like, I didn't watch the video because we already have one Ed Sheeran. We don't need another one. And so many people, I could tell so many people were just like emotionally invested by this guy. In this guy. I lost 200 followers from that tweet. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
You guys have really thin skin.
It's really weird how people it's weird how people got behind him.
Yeah.
They were like worshiping the ground that he walked on from this one video.
Right. And then it comes out later that he doesn't really know what he's doing. A lot of the people who had supported him are now questioning their support. It's like, look, I'm not supporting some dude who I saw 30 seconds ago on the internet. I don't know anything about him,
video.
But I do know he's ugly.
Well, he got in a lot of heat because he canceled a show last minute because the tickets were too expensive. Did you hear that?
Yes.
The tickets, he learned that the tickets were $100 and he canceled the show last minute. And he said, I'm not gonna play anywhere if it's more than $25. And it turned out he was getting paid $120,000 for the show.
Right.
And he backed out. I'm just like, ugly people.
Well, that's just like socialism works like that. You figure, well, I'm going to go make $120K from a venue that seats 1,500 people, but they shouldn't charge more than $25 to $50 a ticket. Like,
okay,
I can do some quick math. If they do $50 a ticket at 1,500 seats, that's $75K. And they're paying you $120K.
Yeah, and
so
the what do you call the venue owner? They were like, we're breaking even on this.
Yeah,
just because we knew people wanted to see him.
Yeah,
and he screwed it up.
Yep, won't be the last time, and it won't be the last Oliver Anthony who gets his 15 minutes of fame and doesn't know how to deal with it.
Okay, everybody, thank you. Don't forget to click the link in the description. Check out Alex on Twitter and everywhere else. And we'll see you next time. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye, bye, bye.